me to watch and pray.
On Saturday,
Told me just what to say.
on Sunday, gave me the proud and wrong.
He gave the gift of love.
On Tuesday,
Peace came from above.
on Wednesday,
Told me to have more faith.
on Thursday,
Gave me just a little more grace.
on Friday,
Told me to watch and pray.
on Saturday,
Told me just what to say.
on Sunday, gave me the proud and wrong.
Please stand for the prayer, pledge of allegiance, Providence St. and the singing of the national. Lord, we come together to reflect and celebrate the life and work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement. In this assembly, remind us of Dr. King's strength to love in the face of adversity, the strength of people during the Civil Rights Movement, and a demonstrated faith in God. It is with God's help we can continue Dr. King's legacy and those involved in the Civil Rights Movement, in this time and in this place. Let us remember that in times of challenges and misunderstandings, we have the strength to love. Lord, open our hearts and minds to hear your message today. Please recite with me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now for the Providence St. mission statement. At Providence St. we believe. We believe in the creation of inspired lives produced by the miracle of hard work. We are not frightened by the challenges of reality, but believe that we can change our conception of this world and our place within it. So we work, plan, build, and dream in that order. We believe that one must earn the right to dream. Our talent, discipline, and integrity will be our contribution join in singing the first verse of the Black Mountain.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Good morning. Happy King's Day. Had he lived, he'd be 94 years old today. Someone said on the radio the other day, what would Dr. King have said that he lived, survived the shot? I'm sorry to say I don't think he would like what he's saying. Back in the day we sang, "We Shall Overcome," and we meant it. Some years ago, I asked a young child in the street, who is Martin King? Who is Martin Luther King Jr.? Does he play on the Bulls team? We shall overcome. Lying has become an art form. Did you hear me? Lying has become an art form. I don't know whether we overcome it or not. My personal experience with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And when I tell people that I knew Dr. King, they, you knew him. Yes, I did. He got me out of jail. March 9th, 1960, I was involved in a protest on my college campus at Alabama State University. And I was able to dig up the article. You're not gonna be able to see it, but it says, faculty member husband among 37 jailed by police. I remember Dr. Underwood's wife had been arrested well enough, and he came down to the jail and they put him in jail. I was a 19-year-old sophomore. In the paper it read, Paul Joseph Adams, 1401 Tulloch Avenue. They put your address in those days to try to intimidate you. The bond was $200. Could have been $2 million if we didn't have it. In today's currency, we're talking about $2,000. Members of the black community used their homes as collateral to get us out of jail. We all went to trial, found guilty, of disturbing the peace, whatever that is. Fine $200 or 200 days in jail. Dr. Benjamin Mays, then president of Morehouse College, Dr. King, and Dr. Ralph Abernathy, then pastor of First Baptist Church, held a fundraiser to keep us from going to jail. So I am grateful and most appreciative that they kept us out of jail. We were all terminated from the college, but a very gracious Dr. Martin Luther King took the time and spoke to each of us, offering us scholarships to colleges and universities around the United States. He offered me a full scholarship to San Diego College. I thank him profusely. Well, I told him I was the oldest of four, that my father had died when I was 8, and my mother needed me at home. This was not my first encounter with the 5 feet 7 inch giant. I consider him the greatest individual of the 20th and 21st century. He was born Michael King after his father. He was Little Mike and his father was Big Mike. In 1934, Reverend Michael King Sr. attended a meeting of the Baptist World Alliance and visited sites in Berlin associated with the Reformation leader. He changed his name and his oldest son to Martin Luther. During Dr. King's collegiate career at Morehouse, they call it the House, Crozer Theological Seminary, Boston University, he was a very serious student, but enjoyed dancing, playing little cards, and understand that occasionally did a little pool shooting. Upon meeting Coretta Scott while attending Boston University on a blind date, he said that he was Napoleon and she was his Waterloo. They were married a year later. He wrote some 30 books and went to jail 29 times in a period of 12 years. Remarkable. My first encounter with Dr. King, I was 14, and it occurred at an assembly in an auditorium very similar to this one. I encourage you young people to listen and analyze what you see and hear today. That same year, I was influenced by the legend of Emmett Till in Minot, Mississippi. He was 14, I was 14. From Chicago, went down to Minot, Mississippi to visit his uncle. Thank God for his mother. In December, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a white man and was arrested and jolted the 26-year-old Martin Luther King Jr. into the national headlines. In his speech at the Hope Street Baptist Church, he did not disappoint. They all came out to see the young king. Doc had him rocking. He had him on the edge of the seat. There were some 4,000 people there that night to see the young Dr. King. the Montgomery boycott was on. In December of 1996, the Supreme Court ruled that segregated buses were unconstitutional. My mother was not pleased with me, with my behavior on the first day of the buses being integrated because I almost sat on the driver. I kept myself involved in the movement and was a child member of the first organization started by Dr. King, MIA, Montgomery Improvement Association. Montgomery Improvement Association. After about a year, I was reinstated in school, got my undergraduate degree, and accepted a teaching position in a small town of Clanton, Alabama, some 40 miles from my hometown of Montgomery. Just before reporting to my first teaching position, I received a phone call asking, "Are you Paul Adams?" "Yes, sir." "An Alabama State graduate?" "Yes, sir." "Well, Paul, we will not be able to offer you the position. You're on the blacklist. You were involved in the movement." My thoughts then and now, thank God. It was a wonderful gift to me, and I think it was providential. On to Chicago in 1962. The only person I knew was a young lady that I helped to drive. I had several difficulties in the beginning, but I remember Dr. King saying, I have it on this button, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moment of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the time of challenge and controversy." March 1965, Selma, Alabama, Bloody Sunday. I watched on TV the beating of the demonstrators from the Alabama State Troopers, a peaceful demonstration, trying to earn the right to vote. Dr. King appeared on TV saying that we have the right to peaceful protest, and we are going to march from Selma to Montgomery. Peace-loving people, meet me March 21st in Selma. I told my then principal I was going to Selma, Alabama. He said, "When will you return?" I said, "I don't know. I might not make it back." Took a flight from Chicago to Atlanta, and Atlanta to Montgomery. My mother said, "You should let someone else go." To my dear mother, I stated, "I am that someone." Driven to Selma by my cousin, who insisted I was crazy to go. You remember, they just murdered Jimmy Lee Jackson. You need something to protect yourself. To him, I said, "This is a nonviolent protest. I would not do anything to jeopardize the integrity of this march." I anticipated that some of us would lose our life, but we made it to Montgomery. The last rest stop before marching to the Capitol was St. Jude High School. I got the opportunity to see and shake his hand along with Coretta Scott King. I would never get a chance to speak to him again. Thursday, April 4, 1968, the dreamer was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, supporting a strike by city sanitation workers. Dr. King, your dream is still alive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Ordained as a minister at the age of 18, earning his PhD at the age of 26, Dr. King gained prestige as a civil rights leader after the victory of the Montgomery bus boycott, which led to its desegregation. Coretta Scott King stated, Dr. King's theological belief in the interdependence of all life inevitably led to methods for social change that dignified the humanity of social change advocate as well as his adversary. Christ gave us the goals, he would often say, and Mahatma Gandhi provided the tactics. During the 50s and 60s, his philosophy of nonviolence resistance led to his arrest on more than one occasion, death threats, the bombing of his home, and an earlier assassination attempt as a woman plunged a letter opener into his chest during a book signing in New York. His campaigns were met with mixed success, but it was his protests in Birmingham, Alabama, which brought him worldwide acclaim. In 1963, Dr. King spearheaded the March on Washington, which brought together more than 200,000 people. In 1964, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The 1960s were tumultuous years for Dr. King, as more militant voices opposed the nonviolence movement. Dr. King's interests widened from civil rights to criticism on the Vietnam War and a deep concern over poverty. It was while he was making plans for a Poor People's March that Dr. King made a trip to Memphis, Tennessee to lend his support to the striking sanitation workers. On April 4, 1968, Dr. King was shot and killed as he stood on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. Today, we will follow a timeline of the civil rights movement during Dr. King's time, hear excerpts from sermons of Dr. King, hear an excerpt of the speech from the only female speaker on the March of Washington program in 1963, and the letter John Lewis left for future generations upon his death. Although Dr. King's sermons and March on Washington happened over 50 years ago, they are timeless as they can be applied to our lives today. It is through this small snapshot of the civil rights movement that we reflect on those who came before us and remember whose shoulders we stand on.
During 1956 through 1957, several key factors happened. Brown versus the Board of Education was decided by the Supreme Court, effectively ending school segregation. Although many schools remained segregated, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on a bus to a white man, prompting the Montgomery bus boycott. 9 black students, known as the Little Rock Nine, are blocked from integrating Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, which resulted in President Eisenhower sending federal troops to escort the students. President Eisenhower signed into effect the Civil Rights Act of 1957 into law to help protect voters' rights. Dr. King begins his pastorate at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama, earned his doctorate from Boston University, becomes the president of the Montgomery Improvement Association, and Dr. King is named the president of the Southern Negro Leaders Conference on Transportation and Nonviolent Integration, later known as the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
God is able to conquer the evils of history. His control is never usurped. If at times we despair because of the relatively slow progress being made in ending racial discrimination, and if we become disappointed because of the undue cautiousness of the federal government, let us gain new heart in the fact that God is able. In our sometimes difficult and often lonesome walk of Freedom's Road, we do not walk alone. God walks with us. He is placed with the very structure of this universe, certain absolute moral laws. We can neither defy nor break them. If we disobey them, they will break us. The forces of evil may temporarily conquer truth, but truth will ultimately conquer its conqueror. Our God is able. Martin Luther King Jr., Our God is Able, January 1956.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on marching up to freedom land, marching up to freedom land.
There are words like freedom, sweet and wonderful to say. On my heartstrings, freedom sings each and every day.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on singing, keep on shouting, keep on marching up to freedom land, marching up to freedom land. There are words like liberty that almost make me cry. If you had known what I know, you would know why.
I cannot turn around. No, I cannot turn around. No, I cannot turn around. I cannot turn around. No, I cannot turn around. I cannot turn
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me, turn me, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on singing, keep on shouting, keep on marching up to freedom land, marching up to freedom land.
During 1958 to 1961, 4 college students in Greensboro, North Carolina, refused to leave a Woolworth's whites-only lunch counter without being served. Their nonviolent demonstrations sparked similar sentiments throughout the city and in other states. Dr. King moves from Montgomery to Atlanta to devote more time to the SCLC and the Freedom Struggle, and becomes assistant pastor to his father at Ebenezer Baptist Church. Dr. King is arrested during a sit-in demonstration at Rich's department store in Atlanta, sentenced to 4 months hard labor for violating a suspended sentence he received for a 1956 traffic violation. He is released on a $2,000 bond. Dr. King meets with President John F. Kennedy and urges him to issue a second Emancipation Proclamation to eliminate racial segregation.
In the midst of outer dangers, I have felt an inner calm. In the midst of lonely days and dreary nights, I have heard an inner voice saying, "Lo, I will be with you." When the chains of fear and the manacles of frustration have all but stymied my efforts, I have felt the power of God transforming the fatigue of despair into the buoyancy of hope. I am convinced that the universe is under control of a loving purpose, and that in the struggle for righteousness, man has cosmic companionship. Behind the harsh appearances of the world, there is a benign power. So in the truest sense of the word, God is a living God. In him, there is feeling and will. Responsive to the deepest yearnings of the human heart, this God both evokes and answers prayers. Martin Luther King Jr., Pilgrimage to Nonviolence, September 1958.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. We're on our way to victory. We shall not be moved. We're on our way to victory. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Segregation is our enemy. It must be removed. Segregation is our enemy. It must be removed, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
During 1962 through 1965, Governor George C. Wallace stands in a doorway at the University of Alabama to block 2 black students from registering. The standoff continues until President John F. Kennedy sends the National Guard to the campus. Approximately 250,000 people take part in the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Martin Luther King Jr. gives the closing address in front of the Lincoln Memorial and states, "I have a dream." A bomb at 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, kills 4 young girls and injures several other people prior to Sunday services. President Lyndon B. Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law, preventing employment discrimination due to race, color, sex, religion, or national origin. In the Selma to Montgomery March, around 600 civil rights marchers walked to Selma, Alabama, to Montgomery, the state's capital, in protest of black voter suppression. Local and state police block and brutally attack them. After successfully fighting in court for their right to march, Dr. King and other civil rights leaders lead 2 more marches, and finally reaches Montgomery on March 25, 1965. President Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to prevent the use of literacy tests as a voting requirement.
The list of female pioneers in the civil rights movement is long, but sometimes we do not hear about them. Although there were few in the pulpit, the church ladies kept the house of worship in order. Although there were next to none leading labor unions, an increasing number of women entered the workforce. Although many of the largest civil rights groups were led by men, there were plenty of women who were organizers, thinkers, and volunteers. It goes without saying that to exclude the women in the program of the March on Washington would have been a major oversight. But that oversight almost happened. After protests for some of the civil rights women activists, a tribute to the Negro women added to the program, and A. Philip Randolph would deliver it. More protests from the women activists followed, and a woman was allowed to speak on the program. Originally, the speaker was Miss Medgar Evers, wife of the slain NAACP secretary in Mississippi. But she was delayed, so Daisy Bates, the woman who guided and advised the Little Rock Nine as they attempted to integrate the school, spoke in Mrs. Evers' place. The women referenced are Ms. Diane Nash Bevel, strategist of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Ms. Herbert Lee, wife of the husband who was killed in Mississippi because he tried to register and vote, Ms. Rosa Parks, seamstress, secretary of the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, Ms. Gloria Richardson, leader of the Cambridge movement, and Ms. Dorothy Height, president of the National Council of Negro Women.
Mr. Randolph, friends, the women of this country are pledged to you. Martin Luther King, Roy Wilkins, and all of you fighting for civil liberties, that we will join hands with you as women of this country. Rosa Gray, Vice President, Dorothy Height, the National Council of Negro Women, and the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, the Methodist Church women, all the women pledge that we will join hands with you. We will kneel in, we will sit in, until we can eat in any corner of the United States. We will walk until we are free, until we can walk to any school and take our children to any school in the United States. And we will sit on, and we will kneel in, and we will lie in, if necessary, until every Negro in America can vote. This we pledge to the women of America.
During 1966 through 1968, Dr. King and his wife moved into an apartment at 1550 South Hammond Avenue in Chicago to draw attention to the city's poor housing conditions. Dr. King delivers Beyond Vietnam to a gathering of clergy and laymen concerned about Vietnam at Riverside Church in New York City. He demands that the United States takes new initiatives to end the war. Dr. King publicly reveals his plans to organize a mass civil disobedience campaign, the Poor People's Campaign, in Washington, D.C., to force the government to end poverty. Dr. King returns to Memphis after the first march of 6,000 protesters ends in chaos. Determined to lead a peaceful march in support of the striking sanitation workers during the evening rally at Mason Temple in Memphis, King delivers his final speech, "I've Been to the Mountaintop."
There will be no permanent solution to the race problem until oppressed meet develop the capacity to love their enemies. The darkness of racial injustice will be dispelled only by the light of forgiving love. For more than 3 centuries, American Negroes have been battered by the iron rod of oppression, frustrated by day and bewildered by night by unbearable injustice, and burdened with the ugly weight of discrimination. Forced to live with shameful conditions, we are tempted to become bitter and to retaliate with corresponding hate. But if this happens, the new order we seek will be little more than a duplicate of the old order. We must, in strength and humility, meet hate with love. Martin Luther King Jr., Loving Your Enemies, November 1957.
On April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated by a sniper's bullet while standing on the second floor balcony of his room at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee.
John Lewis was born in 1940 outside of Troy, Alabama, to sharecropper parents. Growing up, he did not like the unfairness of segregation, and upon hearing Dr. King's sermons and the news of the 1955 to 1956 Montgomery bus boycott, Lewis was inspired to act for the changes he wanted to see. In 1957, Lewis attended the American Baptist Theological Seminary in Nashville, Tennessee, where he learned about nonviolent protests and helped to organize sit-ins at segregated lunch counters. He was arrested during these demonstrations, but Lewis was committed to the civil rights movement and went on to participate in the Freedom Rides of 1961. In 1963, Mr. Lewis became chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known as SNCC, and helped plan the March on Washington. Mr. Lewis was the youngest speaker at the event. After the March on Washington in 1964, the Civil Rights Act became law. However, this did not make it easier for African Americans to vote in the South. To bring attention to the struggle, Lewis and Hosea Williams led a march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama on March 7, 1965.
After crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, the marchers were attacked by the state troopers. The violent attacks were recorded and shared throughout the country. The images proved too powerful to ignore. Bloody Sunday, as the day was labeled, sped up the passage of 1965's Voting Rights Act. In 1966, Mr. Lewis left SNCC, but continued to work with the disenfranchised minorities, including ensuring voting rights efforts for all. In 1986, he was elected to the House of Representatives, representing Georgia's 5th district. During his tenure, he called for healthcare reform, measures to fight poverty and improvements in education, and most importantly, he oversaw multiple renewals of the Voting Rights Act. In 2020, Congressman Lewis passed away from stage 4 pancreatic cancer. As we reflect on his legacy, he said after the election of the 44th President of the United States, Barack Obama, when we were organizing voter right registration drives, going on the Freedom Rides, sitting in, coming here to Washington for the first time, getting arrested, going to jail, being beaten, I never dreamed of the possibility that an African American would one day be elected President of the United States. Let's listen to his letter to the nation.
While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people motivated simply by human compassion laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington. Though I was admitted to the hospital the following day, I just had to see and feel it for myself that after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could easily have been me. In those days, fear constrained us like an imaginary prison, and troubling thoughts of potential brutality committed for no understandable reason were the bars. Though I was surrounded by 2 loving parents, plenty of brothers, sisters, and cousins, their love could not protect me from the unholy oppression waiting just outside that family circle. Unchecked, unrestrained violence and government-sanctioned terror have the power to turn a simple stroll to the store for some Skittles or an innocent morning jog down a lonesome country road into a nightmare. If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes root in our hearts that could rob Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina of her brightest and best, shoot unwitting concert goers in Las Vegas, and choke to death the hopes and dreams of a gifted violinist like Elijah McClain. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in, And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state. It is an act, and each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. In my life, I have done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. While my time here has not...
Good morning. It is my pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker for our annual observation of the legacy of Dr. King and the Civil Rights Movement Assembly. A copy of his biography is included in your programs. I will highlight some of his accomplishments. Our guest speaker, Alderman Jason C. Urban, has been the alderman of the 28th Ward since February 2011. He received his bachelor's degree in accounting at Southern Illinois University, Salukis, and a master's in public administration from Providence State University. Before serving as alderman, he served on the local school council at 2 public schools, where he showed commitment to improving education and creating stronger schools, because a strong foundation in education is essential to providing the best opportunities for people. Alderman Urban is dedicated to public service and empowering communities through social change and political organizing. In his position as village manager of the village of Maywood, he implemented changes that made government run more efficient and better for residents. The same type of attitude and thinking is being brought to Chicago's West Side to make government work for the people. Economic development, safety for children, and working families are the top priorities for Alderman Urban. This shows in his legislative agenda with introducing and voting on ordinances which expand economic opportunities for working families and reduce crime on city streets. Alderman Irvin is the chairman of the Chicago Automatic Black Caucus, as well as the chairman of the Committee on Contracting Oversight and Equity. In addition, he serves on 6 additional committees: Workforce Development, where he's the vice chair, Budget and Government Operations, Finance, License and Consumer Protection, Public Safety and Committees, and Rules and Ethics. Alderman Irvin is married to Chicago City Treasurer Melissa Conyers Irvin and is a proud Providence St. Mel parent. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 28th Ward Alderman Irvin to the podium.
Thank you, Ms. Ward. And to each and every one of you, happy to be here, happy to be back. I think I was here maybe 8 or 9 years ago speaking at this very event. One thing that I will say, when I look at the students and the work that you all do to put this program together, while the balance of education is off today, you all are in school learning and being productive. And so I want to thank the school and the leadership for not having a day off, but a day on where you're learning and bringing something forward to understand the challenges that our community faces and the challenges of the past that also bring us forward to the future. So again, I am happy to be here. This is probably one of the most important holidays of our community, that we celebrate the life and legacy of such a great man, Dr. King. I'm also happy because a schoolmate of you all, this is the first time she will actually hear me speak in such a forum, so I want to have a shout out to our first grade class. Where is Miss Point at? First grade. And there she is, my little girl, Geneva. Also, my wife has joined me today, our city treasurer, as well as my mother, who's actually celebrating her birthday today. So, happy birthday. You know, some of the things that Dr. King talked about, I remember when I was young, and I thought I wanted to be a public official. But when you looked at public officials at the time, the background of the average public official didn't fit the profile of kids from the west side of Chicago. I was born in Austin, and I live here in the Garfield Park community about 2 blocks right over on Jackson and Holman. So I know and understand the challenges that we face. People that live in this zip code are often told that they cannot succeed because where you live defines the capabilities instead of what you are and the content of your character, as Dr. King would say. But here in Providence St. Mel, I see you all show that that is not true. The words I heard, the songs that were sang, the people that spoke gave the best of our community. Again, while I had to also think about myself and what I wanted for my folks, that this is probably one of the best schools in the city because the excellence in academics is part one, but the building of the character is part two. As we reflect on today and we reflect on our great leaders such as Dr. King, and then we just talked about former Representative John Lewis, it is impossible for us to be where we are today without the work and sacrifice of those individuals. Now, I'm sure you all have learned about Dr. King and through your excellent education here. We all know that Dr. King had a dream, and the other part of that is the significance that our city played in Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. We heard a song from Mahalia Jackson, who was a Chicagoan. Dr. King spent more time in this city than any other city outside of the South, as he stated earlier, living on 16th and Hamlin to bring forth the challenging conditions that many of us faced back in the 60s in the North Lawndale community. You also know that he brought people together for the March on Washington in the 60s, again, a protest against the treatment of black folks in this country. You probably heard the I Have a Dream speech, was actually turned 60 this year, that talks about the promise of all men being created equal, which is relevant still to this day. And you also know that he was killed. Thankfully, his fight did not end with his death. His work inspired so many people to get involved with the civil rights movement and many young activists to bring a seat at the table. As the words of Morgan Freeman talked about of John Lewis, heroes getting into good trouble, first by joining Dr. King in the protest, and then through entering the public service as a congressman from Georgia. See, those people paved the way for people like myself and my wife, kids from the west side of Chicago, to reach our own dreams and continue to fight for reality in this country through the public process. But here I'm going to talk about a side of Dr. King and many that you may not know. His work was greater than just the securing of rights of us as a people. And in some respects, I say, as long as we were walking around in circles and singing "We Shall Overcome," folks they paid us attention, but really didn't try to really drop the true hammer that the federal government is known for dropping on. But before he was killed, when his focus shifted to economic justice, that's when a lot of things began negatively to impact Dr. King. If you go into the files that are now released from the FBI and how he was constantly under observation, constantly being monitored, constantly trying to discredit him. But again, they didn't do it to John F. Kennedy for all of the things that he did, and the press did not do it to Dr. King. But when Dr. King started to look at the living conditions of our community, when Dr. King talked about organizing poor people, that is when the trouble really began for him. Now, we could talk about the points of freedom, but can you ever truly be free if you're stuck in the grips of poverty? Can you ever truly be free if you don't have the right to participate in the voting process? Can you ever truly be free if you're living in substandard conditions? So he realized that the work he had done on the civil rights front was one thing, but in order for black folks to totally enjoy the pieces of the Constitution and that all men being created equal, we had to move beyond just the civil rights front and move on to a front of economics, especially those of us who live in urban America. Remember, many of our family members came up from the South, from the Delta of Mississippi, from the cotton fields in Alabama, from all the places in Arkansas, here looking for a better life, but a better life, while it was better, it was not the equality that we had all thought about and dreamed of in this I Have a Dream. And he went on to say, what does it profit a man to eat at an integrated lunch counter if he doesn't have enough money to buy a hamburger and a cup of coffee? Again, economics. But Dr. King really understood that when he planned how he would fight for economic justice, it just wasn't about us as black people. This poor folks, and don't believe what you see. While we have challenging conditions in our community, go to the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. Go down into some of the parts of the deep rural South in Arkansas, and some of the places in New Mexico and Texas. You'll see people living in even worse conditions than we are. The only difference is that they don't look like us. But again, when we talk about economics, that's the great equalizer in this. So when Dr. King started his Poor People's Campaign, right before he was killed, and I believe, and I may not be alone in this, is that when he began to turn toward economics, because when people know if you have the ability to have economic freedom, that you no longer depend on anyone else but yourself. And when people understand that you don't have to depend on them, they don't have power over you. Again, they don't have the power over you. That is when you can reach your full potential. And while Dr. King began to bring people from all walks of life together who were struggling, including the Puerto Rican community, American Indians, Mexicans, poor whites, he had the revolutionary vision that the next chapter of his work would be the March on Washington to demand better working conditions and wages. He had often said that we're going to Washington to get our check. To get our check, meaning that we needed the ability to have economic freedom. Now, the archives of his work include many speeches he had written for labor unions, workers' rights, conditions, and the Poor People's March did occur in the late 60s, but sadly without Dr. King, as we know, he had passed on by this point. And you always have to remember, the plan in our community is that you kill the man, you can kill the plan. If you kill the man, you can kill the plan, which is why the government went on a tear to discredit him in the eyes of our community. But standing here a half a century later, Dr. King's message is still as relevant as today as it is forever, and that fight for economic justice continues. The fight matters because we are, as America, one of the richest countries in the world, but the gap between those at the top and those at the bottom widens on a daily basis. This fact matters because in Chicago, over 17% of residents are living in poverty. In our community, that number is 30% that live below the poverty line. How many miles, can somebody tell me how many blocks are in 3 miles? 3 miles, 8 blocks, a mile, 24 blocks. Would you know that in the city of Chicago, there is a 16-year difference in life expectancy for somebody that lives in Garfield Park, the community that we're in, and somebody that lives in Lincoln Park, a mere 3 miles away. Anybody here from Inglewood? And Inglewood folks. That 16-year number just went to 30 years. So imagine a 30-year life expectancy difference with people that live in not only in the same county, in the same city, and even on the same side of town. So again, the work that Dr. King talked about is nowhere near completion. So it is on us to continue to fight and to continue Dr. King's legacy, to continue to fight for the poor, to fight for the disenfranchised, to fight for better access to health care, the fight for better economic justice, the fight across all races, ethnicities, genders, sexualities, and ages, because it is an issue that brings all of us together. This work is only one piece of the puzzle to help us to create a better Chicago for all of our citizens and to continue King's fight for economic justice. We as elected officials, we cannot do all of this alone. And I'm glad to be here because I know that the caliber of student here at Providence St. Mel are the same people that are going to lead us beyond where we are today. Now, you all are probably wondering, what can you do? Now, when Dr. King did a lot of the things that he's done, I'm almost 50 years old. And by the time King was 50, he didn't make it to 50. King died in his late 30s. And so all of the work that he did, all of the greatness that he's talked about, was someone that happened really a lot of it in his 20s. So think about this. Some of you all are in your teens. In the next 5 years, you may be 20 years old. And at the same time that he did the work that he did, these ideas and greatness aren't going to come from people like me. They're going to come from young people like you. So it is incumbent upon you all to move forward and to work hard and to be everything that you all can want to be. Now, they talked about the power of the vote in the democracy. Some of you all are at the age of being able to vote. Some of you all will join the age of a majority to vote in the very near future. And I want you all to make sure that your voice is heard. The younger people from the ages of 18 to 30 are the largest body of people in this country, but are the lowest participators when it comes to the voting booth. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our forefathers fought for that right for all of us, and it's important that we continue to exercise, because if you don't exercise it, it's very easy for it to be taken away. When you look at states in the South and all of the laws around voter suppression, you got to stand in line for hours. You can't hand somebody a bottle of water in sweltering heat to vote. That is illegal in some states in this union. So we have to understand and know that we are in a situation where people do not want us to exercise our franchise and be part of the process. And let me say this, each one of you all are here because somebody cares about you. People, I'm gonna be honest with you, I think every time I see that money evaporate out of my bank account every month to pay tuition, somebody cares about you. I think about it. I had to go buy a Chevy because I really wanted a Cadillac, but I had to think about the fact that I have to make sure that my daughter gets a good education. So imagine what people can do with these funds every month, but they're investing them into you. Young people are being invested in. So believe me, somebody cares about you. Someone cares enough for you to make sure that you have a better opportunity in life. I don't want to sell any more raffle tickets. I don't want to hear from Ms. Dixon. But yet still I know it is part of the game plan for creating a better future for my family. But again, those sacrifices that your parents and your family is making to bring you here, because they want you to be a success. Dr. King wanted you to be a success. Congressman Lewis wants you to be a success. Alderman Irvin wants you to be a success. And that is why we put this emphasis in investing in our future. Now, what would happen if we would have turned and looked the other way and not participate and not deal with the things that are going on around us and just simply give up and give up on you? That is not what we're charged to do today. It is charged for us to make sure that you all create a better environment, not only for yourselves, but for your fellow man and for your community. Because it is never too late to start championing causes that you care about. And look at ways for you all to become involved in what is happening. And again, I implore each and every one of you all to take advantage of this situation here at Providence St. Mel to do not only good for yourselves, to do good for our community, to be to be a change agent for the future, and for you all to continue, in the words of John Lewis, to get in good trouble. Thank you and God bless you.
As our choir comes up to the stage, let's give Alderman Irvin another round of applause. Today, we heard speeches from Dr. King, learned the timeline of the Civil Rights Movement, heard some background information and knowledge from Mr. Adams' experience with Dr. King and the movement. Received the charge from Alderman Urban to be a change agent, and hopefully something you heard touched you and motivated you. I want to thank you to our guest speaker, Alderman Urban. Thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you to the students who participated in the skit, our choir who sang, thank you. Thank you to Wesley, who's our tech person on the side. Thank you. And thank you to our parents and guests who came out to share with us our assembly, as well as our students, administrators, teachers. Thank you all for your support in this morning's assembly. Thank you. At this time, our assembly is ending, and you will go back to your first period class, your trials. This is for middle and high school. Middle school